All right, so you've all heard about the vacant buildings, office buildings especially, that have been suffering in the market. In New York City, it's as high as 50% that the valuations are going down on those buildings. In this local Atlanta market, 20% are starting to suffer already. So I wanted to draw through some points, some factors to consider if you're thinking about investing and what to do about it, like what to look out for, what to underwrite for. So let's jump into it, okay? Number three, well, the three factors rather, are early suffering, layout potential, and systems conversion. So if you don't have these three things in mind when you're investing in office buildings to convert to, say, multifamily, which is the purpose of this video, I should have mentioned at the beginning, which is really what people need, multifamily, so that we can have more density and create more affordable housing. So number one, early suffering. The assets that are suffering right now are the ones that you want to keep an eye on. You don't necessarily want to move on it, right? You want to be patient, and hopefully you could wait long enough to where you could get a great deal. Makes me think of this shirt I got. It's at this place called Buffalo, and they sell used clothing. And I waited for like the next week till they had a big sale. This is a custom-made shirt, and it was pretty expensive. So I was like, it'll probably still be here, a week from now. So instead of buying it at full price, I just waited, came back to the store, and got an even better deal because it's used clothing, obviously. It's already kind of a good price anyways. So just wait, keep an eye on the assets, and that way you also get an idea of what a good price is as you're underwriting too. You also want to research what cap rates mean if you're new to commercial. So let's say a simple way to break down cap rates is if you bought a property for $1 million and it makes net 100,000 per year, that's a 10% cap rate. It's just a simple division equation. So those sorts of things keep in mind. Look at the early suffering assets and keep an eye on them to see if you can get an even better deal down the line. Now, layout potential is another factor. If you have, like in this particular office building, it's not very conducive to having like a queen size bed in here, but there are office complexes, for example, one I looked at near the airport, which is selling for about $1.5 million. It's going to auction, which shows you how desperate they are to get rid of it. And it's pretty gigantic building. The offices inside of it could easily be converted to studio apartments. If all the offices in this building look like this, would not be easy to just wham bam, thank you ma'am, put a studio in there. You would have to break down a bunch of walls, in addition to soundproofing and all these other things. You want to have a layout that's already has a good potential, which brings us naturally into systems. So commercial buildings are not made like residential. Obviously, there's not as much soundproofing, so there's not as much insulation. The ceilings are, for the most part, foam, so that inherently also from level to level is not as much insulation for soundproofing. So you want to keep these things in mind when you're underwriting. So when you're rehabbing an office park to convert into multifamily, first of all, make sure the county is down with that and wants multifamily. But second of all, that it's going to be practical for people to live there. The first also, or I guess is a second factor in considering systems is plumbing. So office buildings are not built like residential. They have usually one centered space of where all the plumbing occurs, the hallway bathrooms. And so what may end up happening is, diverting plumbing systems away from those hallways into actual units. Or if you wanted to save as much money as you can, you could convert the building into a full-on pad split and everybody just uses the common bathroom area. Of course, you'd have to expand the space, the density of the bathroom, convert the stalls into showers and, make it all structured in a way to it makes sense. You don't want to just have people on top of each other using the bathroom, right? You want to have a bunch of private stalls, showers, toilets, and it might even get to a point to where you have to reserve space if it's a tight scenario. But maybe that's more applicable to like a laundry scenario, because if you have, 20 people living on one floor, you're going to want to distribute the laundry use more effectively than, hey, just everybody go in there whenever you want. Uh, Whereas bathrooms would be likely more different. You would have a scenario where you're probably going to have at least 5 to 7, in my opinion, and people just go in and out, just like in an office complex, but just bigger. So those are some factors to consider. I'm trying to think if there's any others. Roofs are obviously different when it comes to commercial. They're usually flat, torched down, essentially you roll the mat out and it just goes out that way. So keeping an eye on when those need to be replaced, if it's 10, 15 years, 20 years. What else is there difference between residential and commercial? Oh, the HVAC system. So again, most multifamily apartment complexes, they have their own HVAC system in the unit, like the utility closet, a small little unit. But in office buildings, they have usually, a handful or one gigantic HVAC system that serves the entire building, depending on how big the building is. So this is something you want to keep in mind too, to understand where the ductwork goes, how it gets distributed. Do you have to divert it away, or do you have to consider another way to improve the air system, which is add a whole lot more insulation, and based on how the building is already well insulated, you wouldn't need as much HVAC power to operate the entire building. Some people don't know that. Let's say if you bought a house and you put about 3 feet in between the outside wall and inside wall and filled up the in-between with as much density as you could, like insulation, wood, that insulation alone could keep the house inside at a room temperature automatically, because there's just it's like a brick wall times 10, right? The more density you have, the more soundproofing you also have, in addition to air just being concentrated in. So there's different ways to think about insulation for air, but also soundproofing. It's not as overwhelming as people might make it seem to be. Brings me to mind, if you wanted to quickly soundproof like one wall to the other, you could just double up the drywall, and that's all it really takes to eliminate 80% of the sound. Now, if somebody drops a anvil on your foot, that's probably going to be hearable, but that's one exception. So those are some factors: early suffering, look out for, layout potential, and systems conversion potential too. So keep all those things in mind. And of course, if you want to join me in exploring these sorts of projects, I'd be glad to talk to you about them. Right now, we're actually looking at a close to 200 unit complex, and so we're going to have a lot more campaigns going out to raise capital for that sort of much bigger project than we're used to. So exciting times for Commonwealth, and I hope it's exciting times for you in your investing path too. If you have any questions, of course, reach out to me. I'd be glad to help, because we need a lot more affordable housing through density, and multifamily eases that. I could go on a bunch of tangents on that, but I'm just going to stop there because it's long enough already. All right, catch y'all later.